Free agency is almost upon us, and that means some more cutdowns are coming on across the National Football League. We'll get to all of that and what it means for the Jets here on a Wednesday edition of Football with Faria.
It's time for Football with Faria.
You got to get the offense right, and you got to be able to be aggressive. They put up 14 against the secondary. That is driving me up a freaking wall right now.
Now here's your host, Nick Faria.
Alrighty, everybody. Welcome inside Football with Faria. We have a lot to get to today, a lot to discuss. Talking about some of the big storylines that have happened around the NFL this past week. A couple of Jets news as well. And also some breaking news that directly implicates the New York Jets in the 2024 season. We want to talk about the Jets' chances of being a contending team in the AFC. We want to talk about their chances of being a contending team in the division, the AFC East. Man, it got a lot easier today. It certainly got a lot easier today. We're going to get to all of that in a little bit, but first I do want to mention, for any of you jumping on for the first time, thank you for coming on. Make sure you guys like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you guys want to call in, the link in the description down below. But there's a lot going on here across the NFL, and we have to talk about it because we can start with the Bryce Huff franchise tag decision. We can start with the Buffalo Bills essentially releasing every single good defensive player they have. Or how about the Dolphins, who are letting arguably their best homegrown defensive talent walk in free agency? So you guys tell me, what do you want to start with? I think we have to start off with the Bryce Huff news. The Jets, unsurprisingly, did not franchise tag Bryce Huff. As expected, the move was going to cost about $20 million. And Bryce Huff is now set to be able to hit the open market for the first time. For the first time in his career. So, if you're talking about this, about the good stuff that Bryce Huff can do, absolutely. He has every right to look up the open market. Undrafted player, has grown into a perennial Pro Bowl type player, a 10-sack type of pass rusher. He is absolutely deserving of getting the largest market amount that he can get for a new contract. Bryce Huff has absolutely that right to do it, and I think Jet fans that are expecting him to take a discount because it's the team that brought him in the first place, that's wrong. And luckily, I don't hear a lot of Jet fans doing that. Most of you guys understand that Bryce Huff has every right to choose where he wants to go in free agency. And if the Jets wanted to keep him, they should have done it last year. But they didn't, and that's okay. That's okay, because they are in a unique position going forward to not only just not necessarily miss Bryce Huff, but to at least be able to replicate his production in the aggregate. We talk about Moneyball with Billy Beane and the Oakland A's. But when you're talking about pass rushers in the National Football League, it's kind of like Moneyball, particularly when it comes to pressures. If you have multiple guys that can get after the quarterback, that is a godsend. And that means you don't have to pay all of them. You don't have to. You have Will McDonald taken in the first round last year. You have Jermaine Johnson from 2 years ago. That's a solid core of pass rushers that you can trust to be starters going into the 2024 season, but also beyond. And then if you want to add in, John Franklin Myers is still on the team. John Franklin Myers is still the guy that you can trust as an edge defender against the run who can consistently get after the passer when he needs to. The Jets pass rushing group is in a very unique situation where if they can bring Bryce Huff back, it's a great thing. It's 100% a great thing. But if they don't, they're not in a position where it greatly is going to affect that defense because you still have an elite cornerback duo, you still have an excellent linebacker duo, and you have arguably a top 5 defensive player in football on the defensive line with Quinnen Williams. So yes, the Jets should try and find a way to lock up Bryce Huff to a long-term deal. What does that mean? We'll get to that in a little bit. But they should try to find some common ground to bring him back on a long-term deal. What that means is, whether it's 17 million, whether it's 15 million, I continue to circle the Hassan Reddick contract when he first got signed with the Philadelphia Eagles back in 2022. 3 years, 45 million, 15 million a year. That's the contract that I think fits perfectly with what people should be expecting with Bryce Huff. I don't think he should get 25 million. I don't know if he's even asking for 25 million, but 20 million is certainly up there for a pass rusher that has some questions. And I'm not saying he's a bad player, but we don't know what he's going to look like as a 3-down pass rusher, a 3-down edge rusher playing 50 to 60 snaps a game, potentially. We don't know what that's going to look like for Bryce Huff. You can replace the type of pass rusher he is with a speed guy like Will McDonald by trusting Jermaine Johnson as an every down player. You can do that sort of thing and be okay. So Bryce Huff entering free agency, I know a lot of people are going to be upset about that. Some people within the Jets are going to be upset about it because they want to keep him. But in the long run, what's better for the organization? To use the money that you can give Bryce Huff for the offensive line, or to pay a big sum of cash to a pass rusher that you do not know can play every single down for 4 quarters for a 17-game season? The Jets defense is predicated on their pass rush coming in waves. There's a lot of teams that don't do it like that, but there are some teams that have historically been great consistently because they come at you in waves as a pass rush. The New York Giants did in the late 2000s. Philadelphia has done that in the late 2010s. And the Jets have had a lot of success in the last couple of years doing that. So if we're going to talk about Bryce Huff, we have to talk about and acknowledge the obvious, that the Jets are probably going to be in a solid situation whether he is brought back in free agency or walks. It's just the fact of the matter. The fact of the matter right there. But there's a lot of other breaking news today. A lot of AFC East conversations to talk about. You have the Buffalo Bills releasing not just Tre'Davious White, not just Jordan Poyer, not just Micah Hyde. Their entire secondary has been completely shelved. And this is what I said. I sent this tweet out a couple minutes ago before I went on live, and I was stunned that there were some people actually disagreeing with me. Because if I'm going to look at the New York Jets outlook for 2024, and a lot of people are going to do this, they're going to look at the Jets 2024 season and say, yeah, well, they have some questions on the offensive line. Aaron Rodgers is over 40 years old. How can you trust that organization to do anything right, whether it be the draft or when the games actually matter? But then I look and I look at what the Dolphins are doing, and I look at what the Buffalo Bills are doing, and you can't tell me, you cannot sit here and tell me that the New York Jets are not in a position to not just be competitive next season, but to win the division outright. Outright. You may think that's crazy, but Christian Wilkins is gone in Miami. Tre'Davious White, arguably the best corner that the Bills have had in 20 years, is gone. These guys are just gone. They have been cut. They could negotiate new deals elsewhere. And I'm supposed to believe that the Bills defense, which played very well down the stretch last season, but it's supposed to magically get better in 2024? This is the deepest class of corners in the draft. And the Bills could absolutely target one in round 1. They could absolutely do that. But am I going to trust that round 1 corner over the likes of Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and Michael Carter? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The Jets are in a prime position right now because if you look at the Dolphins and you look at the Bills, what are those two teams dealing with that the Jets don't really have to deal with? Cap problems. The Jets have close to around $30 million in cap space. The Dolphins and the Bills are over the cap. They have to make more cuts. The Tre'Davious White release happened today. And the Buffalo Bills are still not cap compliant as of 5:14 p.m. on March 6th. There are more moves that have to be done. Think about that. Think about what the Bills have been able to do in the last 5 years. The Bills have dominated the AFC East. They control the division for as long as Brady has left. And they have 0 Super Bowls to show it. They have 0 Super Bowl appearances to show for it. And now they have to cut a majority of the talent on defense. And yes, this draft class is insanely talented. And Buffalo could be a team that is in position to restructure their youth in a very powerful way. Very powerful way. But do I trust that over Aaron Rodgers? A defense that's already set? Bryce Huff can leave. Is the New York Jets defense still the best defense in the AFC East right now? Bryce Huff. Yes. Yes. They don't have a Quinnen Williams. They don't have a Sauce Gardner. They don't have the linebackers that you have. It's insane the difference between what Buffalo is doing right now and the Jets. The Jets opened up some cap space by releasing who? CJ Uzama and Laken Tomlinson. These guys are not changing things. It's not a earth-shattering move. Tre'Davious White is still one of the best corners in football, even with his injury concerns. That's a massive loss for the Bills. Massive. We got a call in from Johnny here today. Johnny, how's everything going?
Going on, Nick? How you doing, buddy, man? Just coming in showing some love. But I love on what you just talked about because myself and a few others like Dano, Bonesy, VR, the regular Scott, and then even Hawk, we were in discussion about what's more important, right? Because this whole thing with DJ Reed or MC2, right? It's such a huge toss-up, and I know it sucks. I'm somebody that's going for more of MC2 because I feel the value is a lot bigger with him. Because
so you're saying re-sign, keep Michael Carter over DJ Reed when that comes to the equation.
Correct, because we don't know what's going to be DJ Reed's asking price, and I feel like if we were to extend MC2 now, it would be a lot cheaper compared to later on. Because I feel like he's going to have an all pro season at some point. And then at that point, it's just going to raise up the amount that he's going to ask for, right? Compared if we were to do it now where we see, he is the diamond in the rough, more to say. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And then the other thing, you're completely right. All of these cap casualties that are happening, it's insane. And I'm hoping that, with that being said, another, what is it called? Somebody else's trash is another man's treasure, right? And I think that's what the organization with JD needs to go ahead and do to be able to go ahead and utilize that. I mean, I'm huge on Runyon. Like, I would love to put in Runyon as a guard in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Smith, maybe Bakhtiari, depending upon that. I still think we need, a backup just in case. So your line would be, I'm gonna say Smith, guard would be Runyon, center Titman, guard AVT, and then our right tackle would be your Fuaga, would be
the 10th
your
overall pick, yeah.
Whoever it is that we would have there, that if Joe Alt was to be there, imagine, not saying that it's going to happen, right? But there's some people that are out there that are getting the rumblings of, JJ McCarthy is starting to trend back up, and he might be up in the top 10s for a QB needing type of player. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that line, the thoughts on the MC2 situation. I love DJ Reed. I'm not saying that I want to get rid of DJ Reed, but if anything, and you might not want to hear this, right? But that proved that the system and the scheme that we have, right? We could get another corner in that Philadelphia game. If anything, it showed with Craig James and Bryce Hall, right? So I'm sorry, I know, man.
Why are we talking about this, man? Why are we talking about this? It
But
happened once. We can move on. Come on.
I mean, it just shows you right then and there, right? What does that mean? Now, I mean, I think Sauce is for the long haul here with the Jets and everything. So the man out would be DJ Reed. Just your thoughts on everything, man, and just let me know. And I
Yeah,
appreciate you, man.
appreciate the call, Johnny. And if you guys have any questions for me, spew them out in the chat. I'll try to get to all of them today. But yeah, listen, I think Johnny has. I'll talk to the first point, and then I'll talk about the second one about the offensive line. But with Michael Carter, what the Jets need to do, and I think certain organizations don't do this, they need to learn from their mistakes. Certain organizations, they just go with what has worked, what will work because it has worked before. And they don't really learn from the minor mistakes that some organizations make. The Jets made a mistake by not giving Bryce Huff the long-term deal last year. I think they know that. The fan base obviously knows that. And most people understand that, yes, there were a lot of questions with Bryce Huff, but he was still a high-volume pass rushing dynamo that you could trust to get a lot of pressures. And by them not extending him last year, you've essentially screwed yourself this offseason by having to give him either a long-term extension or picking up a comp pick when he walks in free agency. One of those two things would have to happen. They have to learn from that mistake here with Michael Carter. This isn't the same case. You can replace a high-volume pass rusher in the aggregate, particularly when you're a defense that comes in waves. You can't replace a slot corner on a whim. How many top slot corners, think about this, guys, how many top slot corners are there in the National Football League? You've got the Chiefs with McDuffie, phenomenal player, Kenny Moore from Indianapolis, Avonte Maddox in Philly, maybe two or three others that I'm missing here, but there's very few elite slot corners in the game. And you have one. You need to lock him up immediately. And you have the cap space to do it. If they decide, if Joe Douglas comes out here to start free agency, and the first move he makes is to re-sign Michael Carter to a long-term extension, I have to say that that's a very strong procedural move by the organization because they understand. We talked about this on Monday, guys. The 5 positions that you have to have and nail if you want to be a Super Bowl team. What is it? Quarterback, receiver, tackle, pass rusher, corner. The Jets are missing one of those 5. You've got your corner. You've got your pass rusher. You have your quarterback and receiver. But you don't want to open up a need there by letting Michael Carter go to the end of his deal. Get in front of it. And if you're a team, if you're a well-run organization, you want to stay ahead of those conversations. The example I talked about was Monday with Philadelphia. They had a great draft in 2018. They drafted Dallas Goedert. We had Mailata, Avonte Maddox, and Josh Sweat. All 4 of those guys are starters and Pro Bowl caliber players on the roster. And you know what Howie Roseman did? Howie Roseman locked them up in 2021, middle of the season. Halfway through, they entered the final year of their deal. He got in front, and essentially all 4 of them were on team-friendly deals going into the primes of their career. Roseman got in front. Joe Douglas needs to do the same here. He didn't with Bryce Huff. He has to do this here with Michael Carter. And the second point, again, a great call by Johnny. The second point is about the offensive line. What are you going to do? There's a lot of guards that are going to be available in free agency. Kevin Zeitler, John Simpson. He mentioned John Runyon. Some tackles as well. Bakhtiari, Tyron Smith. Where do the Jets go from there? And if you're New York, you don't have to overspend right away. And I think this is a common misconception that some teams have. Some fan bases want their team jumping out of the gate in free agency and giving a crap ton of money to the top free agents everywhere. Jacksonville does it. Washington does it. New England's going to do it. These teams jump at the opportunity right away and say, we're going to be aggressive. And you know who the most aggressive teams are usually in free agency? The ones that wait and say, let's let the market dictate the kind of deal we give out and the kind of value that we find. If the Jets are smart, and it sounds like they will do this from conversations I've heard, they're going to be patient. They're not going to get a deal right away, done on Monday, and say, we're here, we've arrived, we're ready to compete right away. They're going to look back and say, we need offensive line help. Let's see where the top offensive lineman goes, and that'll dictate the market of where we can attack later on. If Kevin Seitler walks in Baltimore and gets a $15 million extension elsewhere to a team that's in desperate need of a guard, John Runyon's price tag may drop a little bit because Runyon's not the same player as Zeitler, and I love Runyon. First off, let me get this out of the way. The Jets, if they were to sign John Runyon, it's a great signing. I don't want them to sign John Runyon. I want Philadelphia to sign John Runyon. Let's just put that out there right away. He's a very, very good player. Very dependable. Good pass protector. Is he the top guard on the open market? No. But he's not going to get top guard money. And if he does, then you let him walk. You don't sign him to that mega deal because he's not that kind of player. Runyon would be an excellent, excellent replacement for Laken Tomlinson. Excellent replacement. And then you look and say, okay, which tackle should we get? We have our offensive line. We have our interior solidified. Runyon, Tippmann, AVT. What are we going to do at tackle? Well, the answer to that is very simple. And Johnny kind of alluded to it. A lot of people have been alluding to it. It's David Bakhtiari. And people are going to be angry because, how could you pay a mid-30 round left tackle who's had so many knee surgeries in the past that he can't compete for a full 17-game season? Well, my response to that is, what's the alternative? Look at free agency, guys. Seriously, if you guys want to argue with this, that's perfectly fine. It's all up to you. But look at the free agent tackles on the open market. And you tell me which one doesn't have injury concerns. Which one isn't an injury hazard? Tyron Smith, we want to talk about the injuries with David Bakhtiari. Tyron Smith is in the same boat. This guy hasn't been healthy for 7 years. He has been excellent when he's on the field, and he's been rarely on the field for a full season. When you are the Jets and you are in a position to compete for a championship, it doesn't matter if these guys are injury prone, particularly at a position of substantial need like the New York Jets. You go and get the tackle, whether it's Tyron, whether it's Bakhtiari, whether it's you overpay for 2 guards and you move Elijah Vera-Tucker to right tackle. The one thing I talked about on Monday, for those of you that are just jumping on, is the Jets are in a unique position to have enough salary cap space to solve their offensive line problems in any way they want. Remember, when you get a contract, when a player gets a contract, and the player's contract is, I'll use the Hassan Reddick contract, 3 years, $45 million, with a $15 million annual contract, the annual average. That doesn't mean that Hassan Reddick is getting $15 million per year. So if the Jets are going to backload an offensive lineman's contract, so be it. So be it. Because Rodgers is going to come off the books in a couple of years, and you're going to be getting these extensions done with some of these other players. It's just the way it is. So if you're the Jets and you want to overspend a little bit for offensive linemen, whether it's Zeitler or Simpson or Runyon, that's perfectly fine. Because you can backload the contract so you can be competing while staying aggressive for the rest of 2024 free agency. But they're in a unique position. David Bakhtiari hasn't officially been released by the Green Bay Packers yet. Tyron Smith is essentially parting ways with the Cowboys. The only one available right now is Tyron Smith. And he has said that he wants $15 million to be a left tackle for an organization. If the Jets feel comfortable enough to make Tyron Smith a $15 million offer, then they should. Because that instantly solidifies a left tackle position when he's healthy. Now, off to the side, you have to understand, okay, we have signed Tyron Smith, an all-pro, world-class left tackle. Now we got to get some depth. Whether it's bringing back Mekhi Becton on a one-year deal, whether it's by bringing another player in, whether it's by trusting Carter Warren to be your swing tackle. You need to make sure you have an answer for if you are signing one of these aging tackles. But some of these other guys, especially at guard, Zeitler, Simpson, Runyon, 3 guys that you can trust right away. Start, plug and play day one. And again, I wanted to talk about the draft a little bit. Look at the draft and look how it's positioned. Teams are trying to trade up for a quarterback. Minnesota, there's a report coming out today that Minnesota desperately wants to trade into the top 10 for J.J. McCarthy. So you could have 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10. You could have 3 receivers going in the top 10. And if that's the case, and if it goes in order, that means Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu, and Talise Fuaga are falling to the 8th overall pick with the Atlanta Falcons. Let's say Atlanta is interested in trading out. Could a first and a third be enough? A first and a third was enough to trade from 10 to 9 last year for Jalen Carter. That was enough to move up 1 spot. The 8th overall pick, if you look at the overall value, it's not that much of a difference in terms of overall value as opposed to the 10th. And if Joe Alt falls to 8, I continue to say the Jets should do everything possible to trade up. Get him. Get the guy that you need to be your left tackle for a decade and a half. I continue to say it. Look, if Fashanu or Fuaga fall to New York at 10, it's a great, great thing. And the Jets should walk away with an A draft. But if they trade up to 8 and get Joe Alt, that's an A+. Like we're literally splitting hairs with that kind of conversation. It really is that simple. Really is. Because you're talking about the best tackle class of all time. Not just in the last few years, of all time. 7, 8 potential first-round selections. This doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen. Again, Football with Faria here. We've got the most viewed show. I've been completely surprised by how many people are jumping on today. It's been incredible. So thank you guys for so much for the views as well. We have one question here from Joshua. Is the fact that JD didn't negotiate with Huff, or what I think is that Huff bet on himself? This is a good question from Joshua. From my understanding, it wasn't that Huff bet on himself. It's that the Jets were kind of waiting to see what kind of year Huff was going to have, and they were sort of reluctant to give him the kind of money that he was hoping for. That's kind of what I've been hearing. It wasn't that he was betting on himself, because I think he would have loved to stay with the Jets. It's just the Jets didn't want to give him the money that he wanted, that he felt that he was worth. And it's a little bit of a difference there when you have those kind of conversations. Again, appreciate all you guys for jumping on. Some of the other big news today, we talked about the Dolphins letting go or potentially letting walk their top defensive player. We're cutting a few others. The Bills today have just gutted their defense. What do you guys think this does for the Jets in the long term? The one thing I will say, the Bills weren't the only team that cut someone. The Philadelphia Eagles cut Avonte Maddox in a salary cap move, if you will. Saves them about $2 million. And the one thing I'll say, I'll briefly bring this up. If you're looking at the Avonte Maddox release and you think that Avonte Maddox is done in Philadelphia, probably not the case. Howie Roseman has done this before where he will release a player and then bring him back a couple weeks later on a team-friendly deal. 2 years ago, he did it with Fletcher Cox. Last year, he did it with Darius Slay. This year, he's probably going to do it with Avonte. Could potentially do it with Hassan Reddick, even though I don't think that's going to happen. But an interesting point that I brought up yesterday when it comes to a player like Brian Burns and the likes of Reddick and the likes of Huff. And I truly believe that some of these edge rushers are overplaying their hands with some of the contract negotiations that are going on. Bryce Huff is a phenomenal defensive player, high value guy, gets to the quarterback a lot, obviously one of the best pressure rates in the National Football League, very similar to Hassan Reddick. I consider Huff and Reddick very similar pieces, if not the same. And Reddick is looking for a contract of over $20 million, as is Bryce Huff, as is Brian Burns in Carolina. Which is why I turned yesterday, for those of you that have been following along on Twitter, I tied Brian Burns to Philadelphia potentially in a trade. Because if Philadelphia is going to move Hassan Reddick, which certainly could happen if they get the right deal in place. It certainly could happen. But if they get a second-round pick for Hassan Reddick and they trade him to wherever, Houston, New England, whatever it is, they now would have 3 second-round picks and their first this year. That's plenty of ammo for Brian Burns. The Carolina Panthers are not going to get 2 first-round picks like the Rams offered him a few years ago. That offer's gone. If you're Philadelphia and you can get Burns for a first and second round pick and have 2 second rounders in one of the deepest draft classes in NFL history, would you not take that? Would that not be the move? It makes so much sense to me. Makes so much sense to me. Let's get Johnny back on. Johnny, how's everything going? What are you, man? You cooking dinner today?
Yeah, man. I'm making dinner. I'm making chicken parm for the wife.
So, great deal. Great deal.
So with some tortellini on the side as well. So a little salad, but she's pregnant. So, I'm trying
Congratulations.
to that. I appreciate it, man. It's 3rd one. I'm done. I'm going to go to the butcher. And, but I did have another question because you're bringing all this stuff up. And it's kind of not messes, but it talks about both of our teams, right? So with the NFC and all that, right, and your squad, would you guys look into getting Saquon and bringing him almost back home? I mean, with Swift gone, right, you guys get that one piece and you guys have Saquon on there, it's a wrap. The NFC is yours again. And I know they have to go through San Fran and everything like that, but I mean, that's literally San Francisco in the East Coast. Same thing goes for the Jets, right? There's all these players, all these running back, because I believe that we should have a vet running back behind Bryce and Izzy or whatever. Somebody's going to come in, doesn't expect to be like a Dalvin Cook and complain about having that. So you got your Deontay Foreman. I wouldn't even mind having DeAndre Swift with the Jets as another catching type of running back to run these type of trick plays. Wanted to get your thoughts on that, right? So with Philly, Saquon, or even the King, man, it'll be, that'd be nuts, man.
Johnny, I appreciate the call again. And one thing I'll say about Derrick Henry and Philadelphia, for those of you Eagle fans that are on here, jumping on for the first time, what I love to do is I try to center around conversations about the teams that I'm covering. I cover the Jets right now for Sports Illustrated. I'm covering the Eagles for Pro Football Network. And the one thing I always like to do, because there's a lot more Jet fans that ask questions, so I try to keep it Jet-centric for these guys. But for those of you that are jumping on for the Eagles and you guys want to call in, definitely we can discuss that as well. The link in the description in YouTube down below. We can also join the live chat. But the one thing with Derrick Henry that I said it a couple of weeks ago, and the more I've been thinking about it, it makes so much sense. When Philadelphia went to the Super Bowl in 2017, they went there because LeGarrette Blount, Jay Ajayi, and Corey Clement with the perfect trio for their offense with Carson Wentz. I look at Derrick Henry and I see 2017 LeGarrette Blount. Not the guy that's going to get you 150 yards every game, but that bruiser that's just going to beat the teams down until it's late in the game and everyone gets exhausted. I don't think Philadelphia is going to spend. I know Philadelphia is not going to spend a lot of money at the running back position. It's something they don't do. And they really were at the forefront of this over a decade ago when they essentially refused to pay LaShawn McCoy. They traded him for Kiko Alonso. They were at the forefront of saying the running back position is not worth it. So when you do that, you better make sure the rest of the roster is good. And Philadelphia is going to address the running back room this year. They're going to draft one in the later rounds, kind of like they did with Kenny Gainwell. And they're going to bring in a free agent, whether that's DeAndre Swift, whether that's Devin Singletary, Saquon, Henry. There's going to be someone that's brought in. Conversely, with the Jets don't have the need at running back that Philadelphia has, but they certainly could use a backup running back. The one thing I talk about with a lot of these guys, these high-profile guys that get 400 touches a year, they run out of gas by the time they're 27. Look at Ezekiel Elliott as the prime example. After his first 2 seasons, he was done. He could still get you those really good games, but he was done being the perennial all-pro that people wanted to see. It just wasn't going to happen. So if you're the Jets, you cannot allow Bryce Hall to go through that. You cannot have Bryce Hall touching the ball 400 times and the poor guy is done before he turns 26. It cannot happen. So what you do is you bring in a competent veteran runner who can take over drives on his own. And that was the argument that the Jets had with Dalvin Cook last year. But the problem was the offensive line and Dalvin Cook did not mesh well. Cook did not have a training camp. He was dealing with a shoulder injury. And quite frankly, for the most part, he was well over the age where running backs are expired. So you want a younger type of running back to be able to pair with Bryce Hall so you don't give Hall 25 to 30 touches a game. Because if you do that, you are going to ruin Hall before he gets to his second contract. And that shouldn't be the case. What the Jets could do is they could take a flyer out of the Packers handbook. And I talked about David Bakhtiari and John Runyon. But when you add in those pieces, those are legitimate starters for your roster. So is A.J. Dillon. If I'm looking for a guy that can consistently get downfield, pairs well with Bryce Hall's skill set, A.J. Dillon is at the top of the list. A bruiser. And yes, he has dealt with some injuries. And yes, there's going to be questions and concern about how good and effective he is going to be this season after being the bell cow of sorts, the power back of the Packers for so long. But when you have Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback and you have a precious, just offensive weapon in Bryce Hall, you need to protect him. And you protect him by keeping him off the field sometimes. And A.J. Dillon is a quality backup. I really like Israel Abanikanda. I've spoken to him during the season. He has a great mindset. I think he could be in for a very strong sophomore season. But you cannot go out there in training camp with Abanikanda and Bryce Hall being your running backs. You just can't. You got to find a good quality value at running back. And I look and circle A.J. Dillon as the kind of guy that makes the most sense. He's not going to cost a lot. He's not going to make you an arm and a leg, make you pay an arm and a leg. It's just, if I'm looking at it right now, I would love A.J. Dillon to pair with Bryce Hall. It makes so much sense. And the Jets aren't going to be in on Saquon. They're not going to be in on Derrick Henry or some of these other top free agents. Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs, those kind of guys. They're not going to be in on them because it's not worth it. You already have a number one running back. But a guy, a nice value, a nice backup that can come in 10, 15 touches a game and actually be productive for 15 touches, that's the kind of value you want your GM looking for. That's the kind of guy. And we talk about value, talk about the running back position of value. One position in free agency that has just skyrocketed with top talent is safety. The safety position in free agency has completely changed in the last 2 to 3 weeks. We talk about Jordan Poyer getting cut today, Micah Hyde being a free agent. Other teams as well are going to be in the mix for safeties. Philadelphia is going to get a safety in free agency. The Jets have one safety on the active roster, so they're going to be addressing the position. But there's so many great guys to look at. And I look at Poyer as a really nice fit with the Jets. A veteran, and yes, his best days are behind him, 100%. But sometimes those aging vets that are trying to hang on to the last bit of good football left, sometimes those are the players that provide the most important parts of a team, particularly on defense. The Jets defense is in the right mindset. No one is denying that. But if you had a veteran, not of Adrian Amos's caliber, but Jordan Poyer's, Kevin Byard's, it makes a lot of sense if you target those kind of players, because not only is he going to help a young Tony Adams develop, but he is going to command respect in the secondary. And the safety position that may have been a problem in recent years because of a lack of tackling or lack of communication, that's probably not going to happen with a veteran barking out orders, commanding respect. You want a leader at every single position group. That's when you know you've got the good ones. You can trust Sauce Gardner to be a leader, DJ Reed to be a leader, but you want some guy in the safety room to be that corralling force. And that's why the Jets are probably going after a safety, because there's so many of them. I look at some of these younger guys too. I could look at the Jets and say they should get a veteran player in the safety market. But there's so many young guys that make a lot of sense too. Xavier McKinney would be excellent for this team. Geno Stone from Baltimore could be excellent for this team. Chuck Clark, bringing him back. There's so many safeties in free agency this year that are going to make life difficult for some of these teams. Because if Xavier McKinney, all of 24, 25 years old, hits the open market and gets a long-term deal done with Philadelphia, something that people were teasing a little bit today. McKinney angry at the Giants for not giving him the deal he wants. So he goes to Philadelphia, a la James Bradbury. Hey, it worked once. Maybe it'll work again. But if Xavier McKinney comes out there and gets a deal like $10 million a year, that's going to alter the safety market. Because Kevin Byard is going to want big money. Pro Bowl, all-pro safety, maybe behind the times a little bit. Same thing with Poyer, but they're still dependable guys. That should scare a hell of a lot of people. That's going to scare a hell of a lot of people. There's a lot of teams out there that are going to need a safety and going to need secondary help. And the Jets are going to be one of them in the safety room. One thing that we heard from Brian Costello this past week is that the Jets may not be aggressive to start, and they're looking for these value guys, value along the offensive line, value at running back and defensive line and safety. How many safeties do you know are going to get this massive deal that Jesse Bates got last year or 2 years ago? Jesse Bates got what, $15 million a year? I don't think there's a safety close to Bates' skill set. So the market is going to be a little bit decreased for a player like him. For McKinney, for Stone, for Byard, Poyer, Hyde, Cameron Curl. I look at a team like the Jets. I look at a team like the Jets and all the things that they could do in free agency. And I compare it to other organizations that struggled in 2023. I look at a team like the Atlanta Falcons, the Minnesota Vikings, and I draw some comparisons. Okay, the Vikings have Kirk Cousins. He's a free agent. Well, what happens if he goes? Are the Vikings going to spend a lot of money? Or are they going to try to retool this team around a rookie quarterback? The Falcons are really good. Are they getting Kirk Cousins? Is a Kirk Cousins-led Atlanta Falcons team good enough to win the NFC? And then I look at the Jets, a team that has a quality number one running back, a quality number one wide receiver, a strong defensive line, excellent linebackers, all pro corners. And then I look at their needs. They need offensive line help in the deepest draft class of all time. They need safety help in one of the deepest free agent rooms of all time. And I look and I say, is really the biggest problem that the Jets might have finding a number 2 wide receiver? Is that really going to be the issue for the Jets this offseason? Because all their solutions are right in front of them. They are going to be able to solve a majority of their offensive line problems early in the process or later in the process. They have all the tools necessary to fix it. In the draft, they're going to have plenty of draft capital to improve the team. Plenty of draft capital. Because there's so much talent. We talked about it on Monday, guys. For those of you that are just coming here for the first time, we mentioned that multiple draft analysts have said in the 3rd round, you are getting starting caliber players. Day 1 starting caliber players. And I look at the Jets, and I look at a team like the Dolphins that have cut 2 of their top defensive players. And I look at the Bills, who have just completely reshaped their secondary. Why not the Jets in the AFC East? What makes people so against the Jets winning the division? Is it the coaching staff? Because we have seen through NFL history, when you have a franchise quarterback, the coaching staff doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Nathaniel Hackett is calling plays on offense. It doesn't matter that Robert Saleh is the head coach. When you have the franchise quarterback, it doesn't matter. Bill Cowher, for 15 years, could not win a Super Bowl with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He gets Ben Roethlisberger, and in 2 years, they win the title. 2 years, and he gets a championship with a franchise quarterback. Andy Reid, for 20 years, couldn't get out of his own way. And in a lot of ways, still can't get out of his own way. And it doesn't matter. The Kansas City Chiefs are back-to-back Super Bowl champions where they were outplayed for the majority of both Super Bowls. And it doesn't matter. When you have a franchise quarterback, it doesn't matter who's calling the plays. It doesn't. It's why the 49ers keep hitting roadblocks the minute they get close. I think Brock Purdy is an excellent quarterback, a great story. Is he a franchise quarterback, the likes of which Patrick Mahomes is? No. You know how many quarterbacks are like Patrick Mahomes? Maybe 5 across the National Football League. And it's obviously debatable. It's obviously debatable. Allen, Burrow. Where do you consider putting Stroud? Where do you consider putting Hurts? Lawrence. There's one guy left from the old guard that's still around who can win when you have the proper talent around him. It's Aaron Rodgers. There's no Tom Brady in his way. There's no 49ers in his way this year. He's the Jets quarterback. They are not playing the 49ers in the playoffs. And I'm sorry, you cannot look at these rosters and see where the Jets can improve and match the needs that they have with the talent level in the draft and free agency and not tell me that an Aaron Rodgers team cannot win when it matters most. Right now, we have already seen the Jets give teams like the Buffalo Bills fits without Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. They gave him fits last year. This isn't some new idea. They continue to do it. The defense is elite. The offense has talent. What it needs is a quarterback and dependable offensive linemen that don't get hurt. Guys, that's fixable. That's all fixable. And if I look at the Jets this offseason and all the moves that these other teams make and all the problems these other teams are having with trying to get under the salary cap, the Jets don't have that problem. They're in a position right now to sit back and say, let's let the market dictate what we do. Do you know how many teams are like that? Do you know how many contending teams are going to be able to do that? The Baltimore Ravens are losing their top linebacker, both of their guards, quality depth at receiver, all of their running backs, and a solid starter at safety. And they have maybe $20 million in salary cap space. They don't have a lot. They have nothing now that they brought in Matabuke to the franchise tag. They're a team that was in the AFC Championship game last year. And they are losing 4 to 5 starters on their roster. And they don't have the salary cap space to replace them. And yes, you can trust their front office because they have an excellent draft record. But if I'm debating between trusting Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to trust the guy with the Super Bowl ring. The guy that's been consistently excellent his entire career. Things that I think something that Jet fans are forgetting, particularly in this set of free agency, everyone's upset because Bryce Huff is leaving or potentially leaving. And there's so many weaknesses on the offensive line, and there's no answer. But how many teams that are going through this kind of thing have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers on their roster? If I'm taking one game to win with Garrett Wilson and Bryce Hall on the roster, there's maybe 3 guys that I want above Rodgers right now. That's a very lucky thing to have. And that's how you solve a lot of the problems. And you can say, well, quarterback doesn't solve everything. And that's obviously true. The Jets are not going 17-0. They're not going to. But is 11-6, 12-5 really that problematic? Is it really that hard to see when this roster is fully put together? They won 7 games last year. This wasn't a certain thing where the Jets were terrible all year and they stunk and no one knows why the coaching staff is back and all this other stuff. They went 7-10. They didn't go 3-14. They didn't go 6-11. They lost 3 games last year with the defense holding opponents to under 20 points. You don't think Rodgers changes that? You don't think free agency with the deepest guard class in a while and the deepest tackle class of all time in the draft will fix that? The Jets are in a rare position, and I'm going to end this conversation on this. The Jets are in a rare position that very, very few teams are noticing. And there's very few teams in this position right now, Philadelphia being one of them, where their needs, their overall needs of the roster can easily be solved in free agency and the draft without having to burn additional assets. Could the Jets trade for Courtland Sutton? Absolutely. That's something that I'll tease a little bit on Friday. For those of you jumping on, again, I think this is the most viewed show we've ever had, so appreciate all you guys jumping on. But could Courtland Sutton be traded to the Jets? We're going to talk about that on Friday, what a potential trade could look like. But if you're the Jets right now, and you were to bring in a guy like Calvin Ridley in free agency, and sign Runyon, and sign Tyron Smith, and draft Fuaga at 10, and sign Geno Stone, and bring back Chuck Clark, and bring back Ashton Davis, sign A.J. Dillon, go to free agency for defensive tackle. You don't think this team can and will compete for the AFC East and AFC crown in general? This team's going to be really good next year, guys. They've got the cap space. They've got room to move. And I think it's high time we stop saying what Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh aren't, and more about the results that are happening this year. Because if Joe Douglas has a good enough offseason, it's not going to matter if you guys like him or not. He's going to stay, particularly if they are a very loud out in the AFC playoffs in 2024. Something to think about, guys. $27 million in cap space, a first-round pick in the top 10, needs at guard and safety, and the deepest guard and free safety free agent and draft class in a while. There's a lot of teams that wish they could be in the position the New York Jets are right now. So appreciate all you guys for jumping on Football with Faria. We're going to close it off here for today. We'll be back on Friday, same time, same place. We're going to talk about Courtland Sutton, what a trade could happen there for the Jets, what the Jets would have to give up, and then we're going to break down free agency, the top needs, the top players, all of that, some of the latest rumors and notes surrounding the National Football League. Appreciate all you guys for jumping on. I'll see you all on Friday.